The Obama administration is tonight fracturing and profoundly. The intelligence and diplomatic communities are breaking openly with the White House, and the issue driving what is becoming open rebellion is straightforwardly this country's national security. Today, the political appointees of the State Department and throughout the administration were jarred by the disclosure that more than 50 diplomats, professional State Department employees, have used the so-called dissent channel to warn the president that his Syria policy isn't working, that the Syrian geopolitical, military, and humanitarian crises require a change in White House policy direction. Those diplomats are urging the president to hit the Assad regime with targeted airstrikes. The White House couldn't or wouldn't say whether Mr. Obama had read the critique of his policies. All of this comes just one day after CIA Director John Brennan displayed considerable courage in contradicting President Obama on the Islamic State, telling Congress that the president's policy against the Islamic State isn't working. Thereby, Brennan also gave public support to Republican nominee Donald Trump's view of the Islamic State and the administration's inadequate response to its threat to this country. Trump last night squarely blamed the administration's weak leadership for its inability to successfully prosecute the war against radical Islamist terrorism.
The problem with our country is we have leaders that give up. They gave up on the borders, totally. It's almost like they gave up on ISIS. One of the top people in the administration, the current administration, just said, and I actually wrote it down, that ISIS is working very hard to come into the West. They're working very hard to come into our country, and they are working very hard. And you saw what one sleazebag can do. One sleazebag over the weekend, what he did.
General Jack Keane will be joining us here in moments to assess the Syrian policy, the battle against the Islamic State, and other challenges, notably from China and Russia. A lot to discuss tonight, including more political correctness from this administration, specifically the Department of Homeland Security. A new DHS report urges the department reject terms like jihad and Sharia because those words allegedly promote an us versus them mentality. Also tonight, House Speaker Paul Ryan demonstrating again that he's either a tool of the Republican establishment, lobbyists, and the so-called Washington cartel, or simply the left. Certainly he's committed to defeating the Republican nominee. The Speaker saying he would sue President Donald Trump if he enacted a temporary ban on Muslim immigration through executive order.
Look, it's not just Barack Obama who's abused executive power. Other Republican presidents have done it before. Other presidents have done it before. We believe the separation between Article 1 and Article 2 has gotten out of control, and we want to reclaim. I would sue any president who exceeds his or her powers.
We'll take all of that up with the Weekly Standard's Fred Barnes and Town Hall's Guy Benson, among others. Also, what's the deal with Senator Bernie Sanders? It seems everyone believes the Democratic race is over, except Senator Sanders. He still refuses to concede to Hillary Clinton. Our top story tonight, the Obama administration's failing foreign policy and weak knees. The Russian Air Force bombing U.S.-backed rebels in Syria twice as the Kremlin warned against targeting Assad. The strikes occurred near the southern city of Al-Tanf, an area where Russia had not previously conducted airstrikes. Russian Su-34 strike fighters hitting rebel positions, units trained and backed by the CIA, with a second strike occurring after the United States had used an emergency hotline to demand Russia halt those combat operations. Defense Secretary Ash Carter, however, offered only a tepid response to the strike, saying the hotline was not, quote, used professionally.
This was an attack on forces, first of all, that were fighting ISIL. And obviously that's the first thing that's problematic about this Russian conduct. Because if you go back, remember the Russians initially said that they were coming in to fight ISIL. And that's not what they did.
Our defense secretary Russia, like China, has upped its provocation on the seas. Russia earlier this week stepping up provocations in the Baltic Sea, shadowing U.S. and NATO ships conducting exercises there. China shadowing our Navy in the Western Pacific in recent days. Joining us now to assess all of this, a retired four-star general, former chairman of the Institute for the Study of War and Fox News military analyst. Jack, great to have you with us. Let's start with Ash Carter. Have you ever seen a defense secretary more seemingly enfeebled, weaker in his response, and uncertain of what he's saying?
Yeah, it's really significant because historically we know how to deal with Russia. We've dealt with the Soviet Union, Russia being a central country in the Soviet Union for years. And what they have always respected, as our Democratic and Republican presidents have found, is strength. And here we are. The Russians, when they intervened in the war in Syria, within days of that, they bombed Syrian moderates that we were supporting. The first time they did that, we should have created the airfield from which those airplanes came, just as we did in Operation Provide Comfort after Desert Shield and Desert Storm with Saddam Hussein forces. And should have told the Russians, look, if you do this again, that we're not going to just crater the airfield, we're going to take your planes down. And the problem with this administration is that they are paralyzed by the fear of adverse consequence. And you've got to get over that if you're going to operate from a position of strength, but they cannot get over it.
Well, the American people are having trouble getting over adverse consequence as well. The adverse consequences of the policies being pursued by this administration, whether domestic or foreign. And we have now the CIA director himself contradicting the President of the United States on the issue of the effectiveness and lethality and potential threat to the United States, 180 degrees opposite what President Obama had said just a couple of days before he spoke.
It is stunning. I know that his statement was prepared.
And by the way, let me say, I think it was one of the rare acts of courage by anyone in this administration.
Well, you know how close he is to President Obama. He was his counterterrorism advisor for years in the White House, and he was also the one who said a couple of years ago that Al-Qaeda is done and they're not consequential. So, you know, he's been wrong in the past, but he is absolutely on the mark here. And it's almost as if he was fact-checking the president, but knowing that his statement was written well prior to the president's statement. But he did fact-check the president. And it's alarming. He said ISIS is formidable. It's resilient. It is a cohesive organization. And we have not been able to reduce their terrorist activities or their global reach. And obviously, we are paying a price for that in the United States. It is stunning in its contradiction, but also so harsh in the truth of it and what it portends for us. Because, Lou, the only way we stop ISIS from killing our citizens is destroy their sanctuary in Syria. It is their center of gravity. And the president has no plan to destroy that. He says, by policy, we are setting the conditions for the eventual destruction of ISIS. Translation, the next administration will face that responsibility. That is an abdication of responsibility.
That's an abdication. It's also an abject breach of his promise to the American people that he would degrade and destroy the Islamic State. And it's also a profound, Brendan's remarks, a profound validation of what Donald Trump has been saying on the issue of the Islamic State throughout.
Well, you know, I don't comment on political candidates, but the reality is, ISIS, despite its losses,
I said it.
I got it. I'm commenting on yours. ISIS is on the march. ISIS is on the march. We've diminished them. They've taken territory, we've taken finance, and we reduced their recruiting. But they've expanded to 10 affiliates, and some of those affiliates are growing, as CIA Director Brennan has said, and as I have said on your show as well. This is an organization that needs to be destroyed if we're going to stop its killing. And until we have a plan to destroy it, the killing is going to go on, and we have no plan to destroy it. That's how sad this is.
Well, General, I appreciate, as always, your analysis. And as I recall, you have been saying to destroy the Islamic State for a very long time, well before the president actually said he would degrade and destroy the Islamic State. So we want to give you credit, too. Thanks so much, Jack. Good to have you here.
Good talking to you, Lou. Take care.
We're coming right back. A lot more. Stay with us. Donald Trump takes his fight to Hillary and the national media, who he says are nothing but liars.
Beating the Democrats is tougher because the press is so dishonest. The press lies.
Tammy Bruce, Guy Benson join me next to take up Trump's war against the press.